call to order the Wetlands Board meeting for Wednesday, April the 10th, 2024 at 5 p.m. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activities so as to prevent their despoliation. Can I get a roll call, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien? Mr. O'Brien is absent. Mr. May?
Here.
Ms. Bowie?
Here.
Before we start, Mr. Chair, we only have 4 members tonight. This meeting will require, or any public action does require 3 affirmative votes from this board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. First item on the agenda is the meeting minutes from the March 13th regular board meeting. Anybody have any suggested changes or corrections to those minutes?
Yes, sir.
All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 13 as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Roadley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. The minutes have been approved from the March 13th board meeting as presented. Next item on the agenda is the public comment period. The public comment period offers a chance for community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not be directly related to specific public hearing items. To participate, speakers must provide their name and address for the record. Are there any members of the public wishing to address the board on an item that is not specifically a public hearing item? Right, seeing none or hearing none, I will close the public comment period and move on to the next item on the agenda. Public hearings. The outline for tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record, and presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion among the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. The first item on the agenda is WJPA-24-0005, a replacement of a bulkhead on 7224 Canal Street. Ms. Grosjean.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grosjean, Watershed Planner, presenting WJPA 24-0005. Ms. Carla Havens, Mid-Atlantic Resource Consulting, has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Ronald and Ms. Joyce Figg for the construction of a bulkhead on property located at 7224 Canal Street within the Yarmouth Creek watershed. The existing site conditions of the property include a failed timber bulkhead and pier. The applicants are proposing to remove the failed bulkhead and construct a new 42-foot vinyl bulkhead within the same footprint or landward of the existing structure. The applicants have stated that a living shoreline is not appropriate for this property due to canal depth and required filling to support a tidal marsh and stone support structure. Here we have the vicinity map. Go back to that real quick. As you can see, there's that Yarmouth Creek watershed boundary there and the subject parcel. Then if we zoom in further, we can see the project area here where that bulkhead, if you can see, is clearly failed, along with existing topography and the current floodplain. For the site plan here, we have the proposed bulkhead. As you can see, it will be within the same footprint. And then a cross section showing here, again, that failed bulkhead where the proposed new one will be going in along with that backfill here. And some of the existing site conditions now, again, as you could probably see from part of the aerial photography I showed previously, you can see this very visibly has failed. Another angle shot kind of looking upslope along the side here. And from the other angle along the side. And as published in the Virginia Register on July 11, 2005, the revised Wetland Mitigation Compensation Policy and Supplemental Guidelines, Regulation 4 VAC, Virginia, as a Chesapeake Bay program partner, is committed to achieve a no net loss of existing wetlands, acreage, and function in the signatories' regulatory programs. In order for a proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. 1, all reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative sitting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. 2, the proposal must clearly be water dependent in nature. And 3, the proposal must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 criteria, then compensation for the wetland loss is required. The sequence of acceptable mitigation options should be as follows: on-site, off-site within the same watershed, mitigation banks in the same watershed, or a payment of an in lieu of fee. If compensation is required, it should be a condition of the permit. Staff has reviewed the application and finds that this project meets the 3 criteria outlined above. There are no vegetative wetland impacts associated with this project, therefore there's no mitigation required. Staff has reviewed the above application and recommends approval of the application as presented. Should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. 1, the applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, including an erosion and sediment control plan and land disturbing permit if total impacts to the property exceed 2,500 square feet of disturbance. 2, all development activities located in the specified flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County Ordinance, and receive all required approval and permits prior to commencement of such activities. 3, the wetlands permit for this project shall expire on April 10th, 2027, if construction has not already begun. And 4, if an extension of the permit is needed, a written request must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2027, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them at this time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grogine. Any questions for Ms. Grogine?
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if we could walk through the site photos quickly again.
Absolutely.
Perhaps not so quickly, just to get a better understanding. That one in particular. So the alignment is just landward of the existing bulkhead?
Correct.
And you note in your report that there's no vegetated wetlands?
Yes, there's no vegetative wetlands. There will be, however, 55 square feet of non-vegetated wetland impacts.
To just a super high tide? Yeah. Very good, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Grogine. I'd like to now open the public hearing for this particular matter. Does anyone from the public wish to address the board? Please state your name and address, please.
Good evening, and I don't know if you're the vice chairman or your substitution for this evening, but thank you for running the meeting. I'm Carla Havens with Mid-Atlantic Resource Consulting, 1095 Cherry Row Lane, Shackelford's 23156, and I'm trying to pull up March 18th. That's a really high tide.
Yeah.
Chuck, to answer your question, that's a really high tide. And I don't want to take up your time looking, but I think you can see that. I have nothing to add to Emily's presentation. Your staff's doing a great job.
Carla, just to get it on the record, can we go through your evaluation process again for why a living shoreline option doesn't work in this situation?
Certainly. Can I scroll back and get photos here? So the yard, you can see, is quite sloped. There is a bulkhead on the right, there's a bulkhead on the left. This section of property is 42 feet long, and if we are to do a living shoreline, we're supposed to have a 10-to-1 slope with an 8-foot wide marsh, and you just can't squeeze that in there. We've got, I think it was 1.5 feet of water in front of the bulkhead there. There's just not enough room to bring it into the yard. It would be at their doorstep. And if you look at the wet cat information on VIM's and DEQ's site. It categorizes this with the purple line, which is, I forget what the exact terminology was for it, unsuitable. It was considered unsuitable for a living shoreline.
Very good, thank you.
Question, the existing bulkhead, is the new one gonna be behind that and remove that so it ties straight into the other one? Or does it seems like it's not lined up right or something?
So you can see my PVC pipe right here. That's, whoops, where we're gonna tie in. That's that one right here, because this is the return on the neighbor's bulkhead. And then down this way, I'm sorry, I'm not technically savvy. There's another PVC pipe. All right, so that's the one on the right-hand side. I'm not seeing the one on the left-hand side. Actually, the proposed bulkhead is going to be landward of the cap that you see right there, because the existing bulkhead has sloughed and it's leaning into the canal.
PVC pipes will be the face of the outside face of the bulkhead.
That is correct, because we're gonna marry the two return walls into each of the adjacent bulkheads.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Is there anyone else from the public that would wish to address the board? All right, seeing none or hearing none, I will close the public comment period and the matters before the board.
Chairman, looks fairly straightforward. I don't see any issues with this as proposed.
I agree with that. Do I have a motion on this matter?
But I'll make a motion to accept case number WJPA 24-005 on 7224 Canal Street.
All right, I have a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the permit request. Mr. Wilson?
Motion to adopt, Mr. Roadley,
Yes,
Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. May.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right, on the agenda now, there are no board considerations noted or matters of special privilege. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
move.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are adjourned.
I'll call to order the Wednesday, April 10, 2024 Chesapeake Bay Board meeting. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy, protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetland streams and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay. Roll call, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Roadley,
Here.
Mr. Waltrip,
Here.
Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien is absent. Mr. May,
Here?
Ms. Bowie.
Here.
Again, Mr. Chair, we have 4 members tonight. Any action by this board does require 3 affirmative votes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You have in front of you the minutes from March 13. Any comments, corrections, or additions?
Sir?
Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the minutes from March 13th, 2024 as presented.
We have a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. I will open the public comment period. The public comment period offers a chance for community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not be directly related to a specific public hearing item. To participate, speakers must provide their name and address for the record. I will open the public comment period. Does anybody have any comments they wish to share with the board? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, we'll close the public comment period. We'll start into the public hearings. The outline for tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation, followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. Presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion among the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. With that, the first item on the agenda this evening is CBPA 23-0174 at 9400 Barnes Road. You're going to need to turn that off.
To get it off, if I can get it off. I got you covered.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner for CBPA 23-0174. Mr. Ben Swift with Lovett Industrial has requested a deferral of this application for exception to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance while the site plan is finalized for this project. Staff concurs with this request. As this case has been publicly noticed, staff recommends that the public hearing remain open and stay open until the May 8th, 2024 meeting, at which time the case will be heard.
Any questions from the board on the request? The public hearing is currently open. No official action necessary other than to keep it open.
Correct.
Very good. We will move on to the next item, CBPA 24-0028 at 7224 Canal Street, construction of a gazebo and gravel patio.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting for CBPA 24-0028. Mr. Darrell Flatham has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Ronald and Ms. Joyce Figg for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a gazebo and gravel patio located at 7224 Canal Street within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision and the Yarmouth Creek watershed. This is the same property that was just heard for the Wetlands Board, so you'll recognize the subject parcel here in blue, and again, the watershed boundary there in yellow. This parcel was platted in 1965 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Again, aerial photography of the property, topography at the site, the floodplain, which affects the entirety of the property, and now the resource protection area. The total lot size of this property is 0.31 acres, of which 45% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a gazebo and gravel patio behind the existing home. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 100 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 100 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA for a total of 200 square feet of impervious impacts. So in red, you'll see both the 100-foot and 50-foot RPA buffers, as well in yellow is that proposed gazebo in the landward 50, and then the gravel patio at the back of the house in the seaward 50. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 6 shrubs. The applicants have proposed 8, which are shown by these green dots. Here, site photography. This is looking at the area of the gravel patio. At the time this picture was taken, the steps here were being replaced. There are steps, and the applicants are proposing that gravel patio coming off of the master bedroom here. And this is standing back towards that bulkhead and just looking at where the placement of that patio is, as well as the gazebo here on the right. Just a different angle. Again, the side with the gazebo. This is the roof of the gazebo. The applicants are waiting to install the entire structure, but that's the approximate placement. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a gazebo and gravel patio. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of these structures is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, including an erosion and sediment control plan and land disturbing permit if the total impacts to the property exceed 2,500 square feet of disturbance. The applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 8 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 10th, 2025, and written request for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for staff?
Just one question. For the gravel patio that's right outside of the sliding doors off the bedroom, you say there were steps there before. Was there a deck there before, or just steps that were removed?
There were just steps, and they were being replaced in that photo in the same footprint.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hearing none others, we'll move to the public hearing. I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board? Would the public care to address the board? Hearing none, is there discussion amongst the board?
I would agree with the county's assessment of a minor impact. I would be in support of this project as presented, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? With that, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board, case number CBPA-24-0028 at 7224 Canal Street.
Mr. Wilson.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0008 at 3820 Rochambeau Drive and 170 Sand Hill Road. Emily.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0008. Mr. Jeff Huntelman, Land Planning Solutions Incorporated, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of MCP Stonehouse LLC, courtesy of Mandrake Capital Partners, for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a water line and associated grading located at 3820 Rochambeau Drive and 170 Sand Hill Road within the Stonehouse subdivision in the Ware Creek watershed. This project is also known as Stonehouse Tract 9. The parcels were platted in 1982 and 1988 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here you can see those two parcels. The one up top here is what is known as 170 Sand Hill Road, and the one below it being 3820 Rochambeau Drive. And as you see, it's both are within that Ware Creek watershed boundary. If we zoom further in, again, you see that 170 Sand Hill parcel along with the 3820 Rochambeau parcel, where the water line will be going down that way. The current topography, along with the resource protection area on both parcels. And then just to kind of give you an overall bird's eye view of this proposed water line, here we have again those two parcels, and this is where that portion of the water line will be running through. And to try to make this as digestible as possible, we've kind of zoomed out here to give you a general idea of some of where these more permanent RPA buffer impacts will be. So you have the 100-foot buffers out here with the 50, and then direct wetland impacts here. Everything that is seaward is in orange. Outside of that, that is in the 50 landward is in yellow. Zooming in further, again, we have that 100-foot buffer, the 50, and then anything directly impacting the wetlands is in orange, and then anything within that 50 landward portion is in yellow. And other impacts, just to the RPA in a general sense, with associated just entryway to the site are marked up here in this pink shade, both here and here and here. These are more temporary impacts. And here we have some current site photography. I don't know how well you can see it in this photo, but as we go through, you'll see where they do have things marked out and the current terrain and topography and how that matches up with some of the aerial imagery I showed previously. Where that water line will be going in certain portions. And we see more of that flagging as we move throughout these photos. Again, here. This is the final. The total lot size of both parcels is 90.46 acres, of which 40% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a water line associated with the development of Stonehouse Tract 9. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 1.08 acres, of which 0.23 acres are temporary impacts and 0.85 acres are permanent impacts associated with the access roads required by JCSA. Required mitigation for this amount of impacts requires the recordation of a deed of natural open space for an area twice the size of the impacted RPA, or 94,090 square feet. The natural open space area shall start from the center line of the middle tributary and extend to the northwest portion of the parcel of 170 Sand Hill Road. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a water line and associated grading. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a water line is proposed by a private developer and not a public authority and is therefore not exempt. Additionally, the construction is proposed within the RPA buffer. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, a deed of natural open space to be recorded in the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a land disturbing permit, and this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by April 10th, 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2026, or 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for Emily?
I have a question, Emily. So for the proposed path of the water line, is that proposed path for like the shortest distance between 2 points as far as like making it more economical to install? Is there another reasonable path it could take that wouldn't impact RPAs, or is it going to impact the RPAs in any fashion to go through this area?
So I can't speak directly to that concerning the access trail. I would defer that to the applicant. But what I can say is based on my conversations I've had with the applicant, the route that was chosen for this water line was selected to minimize impacts to the RPA, and they have situated everything as far west as possible, which is upstream of the ends of the buffer. And if they were to move it further east, that would be impacting larger sections of the RPA buffer.
Okay. Thank you.
Curiosity, have the erosion and sediment control plans been approved by the county for this project?
Those are currently under review.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Thank you very much, Emily. With that, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant care to address the board?
Board.
Name and address, please, for the record.
Jeff Huntelman with Land Planning Solutions. I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I think the presentation covered exactly what we talked about, and I think answered the questions about the path appropriately.
Any questions for Jeff?
I have no additional questions.
I'm just curious, Stonehouse, that area has been plagued with erosion and sediment control issues during heavy rain events and subsequent sedimentation in the streams. Have you taken that into consideration in your design? That's why I asked the question about the NS plans.
Sure thing. Yeah, we've been working closely with SRP, and as we design the phases that are under development, as well as new phases and this phase, and trying to incorporate all those concerns that they've had in other areas of Stonehouse. So we've been taking that advice and applying it to our project. So I think we're doing the best we can to try to make sure we mitigate those issues.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Anybody from the public care to comment on this project? Hearing none, the matter is back to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would be in support of this project. I think it's a necessary project to get water through that area. There are some temporary impacts, but also a 0.85 acre permanent impact that for access roads and whatnot. But I think that's pretty much necessary. So I would support this application.
Any other comments or discussion?
Not a big density of large trees either where they look like the line is running, so it's not going to be a lot of clearing. Looks like heavy clearing. Be able to put that line in there. I support it.
Very good. If there are no other comments, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0008 at 3820 Rochambeau Drive and 170 Sand Hill Road.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Wilson.
Motion to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0017 at 196 The Main.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0017. Mr. Joseph Kralinger, the Structures Group Incorporated, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Ms. Carolyn Hill and Ms. Camilla Buchanan for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the removal of the existing timber retaining wall and replacement with a new concrete segmental block retaining wall located at 196 The Main within the First Colony subdivision and the James River watershed. The parcel was platted in 1963 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. The RPA affected this lot with the 2004 revisions to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. The total lot size of this property is 0.59 acres, of which 34% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to remove the existing timber retaining wall in the RPA and replace it with a new 26-foot concrete segmental block retaining wall. A previous exception for an addition to the existing house was approved under CBPA-23-0081 on August 9th, 2023. The existing retaining wall is showing early signs of failure and has resulted in the need for its replacement. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 26 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 2 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan equaling 8 shrubs and 2 understory trees, satisfying the requirements for both the previous exception and this current case. Looking here, we can see an aerial shot of the parcel along with where that existing exception was granted for the home extension. And then right here where this greenery is where the existing retaining wall that's beginning to fail is located, along with the current topography, as well as the RPA and the floodplain. So again, we have that 100-foot resource protection area buffer, all the work being done within that landward 50-foot. Again, that existing addition approved under the previous CPPA case. What they're proposing is with this current retaining wall, removing a chunk of the existing concrete patio to reshape to this proposed layout, along with mitigation plantings, and still, again, remaining within that same footprint for the most part. The current site conditions, this is a downward shot looking up. You can kind of make out where it's starting to fail here. You can kind of see some bulging. That proposed reshape with the new retaining wall involving the removal of part of the existing patio would occur right here and then come out to where it currently kind of ends here. This is a shot from that very first photograph from above, kind of looking down to where that retaining wall that currently exists does end, along with, again, this area here where the patio is and where it's beginning to fail, which if you move in closer, you can see how these wooden planks are kind of bowing out here. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the removal of the existing timber retaining wall and replacement with a new concrete segmental block retaining wall. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the proposed work is accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners situated within the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, nor does the request arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. Applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 2 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by April 10th, 2025, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for Emily? Thank you, Emily. With that, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board? Mr. Kralinger.
Good evening, Joseph Kralinger, 1200 Old Colony Lane. I'm here to address any questions the board may have.
It appears fairly straightforward, so
Looks like it needs to be done.
Yes, sir.
thank you very much. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Discussion amongst the board.
Mr. Chair, this seems like a reasonable, necessary project to stabilize that area of the lot, so I would certainly support the request.
Agree? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a
Motion to
motion.
adopt.
Go ahead.
Motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for the Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 240017 at 196 The Main.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0030 at 136 John Wickham. Construction of a retaining wall.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grogine, watershed planner, presenting CBPA 24-0030. Mr. David Soto, the Structures Group Incorporated, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Scott and Ms. Janet Kruger for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a retaining wall located at 136 John Wickham within the Kings Mill subdivision and the Skiffs Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1988 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. The total lot size of this property is 2.01 acres, of which 81% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a segmental block retaining wall to combat erosion on the property. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 27 square feet of impacts within the landward 50-foot RPA and 49 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA for a total of 76 square feet of impervious impacts. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 3 shrubs. The applicants have provided a mitigation plan equal to 2 understory trees and 7 shrubs, therefore satisfying county mitigation requirements. As you can see here, this is the subject parcel in question and the location of where the retaining wall will be going, along with the existing topography and its location within the current resource protection area. Looking at the site plan here, everything that is within the 50-foot seaward portion is in orange, with the landward portion being in yellow. As you see, it kind of goes in and out based on the current RPA buffer. There's also the proposed mitigation plantings as well, which will be going into the seaward portion of the buffer. Some current site conditions, you can see somewhat how it's flagged out in pink here. And if you get a better angle here, you can see them a little bit clearer in their reference to kind of the existing topography and the current conditions showing the need for the retaining wall. It's a better angle showing kind of that slope and again where that retaining wall will be going. And just a better angle looking opposite from where we were just standing previously. And then a better, again, downslope shot. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a retaining wall. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a retaining wall is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not a substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. Applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 2 understory trees and 7 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 10th, 2025, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Questions for Emily?
Looking at the drawing, pull the drawing back up of the wall. Does it have the weep holes and to be able to get that water that comes off that hill down to how is it being handled? How high is that retaining wall?
So are you concerned with drainage behind the retaining wall?
You have a section view? Nope. Okay. I think Mr. Waltrip's question pertains to the potential for hydraulic head to build up behind the wall. So I assume that that's being mitigated through either weep holes or some other mechanism, perhaps.
Okay.
I can defer that to the applicant.
I will ask the question, is the intended use of this area to remain as a mulched bed?
I'm going to defer that to the applicant.
Any other questions for Emily? Thank you. With that, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board?
Joe Kralinger, the Structures Group, 1200 Old Colony Lane. I'm here to address any questions the board may have on this project.
I think you heard the question with regard to how you're handling water behind the structure and how is that being mitigated?
Sure. So maximum wall height will be 4'6" of unbalanced fill. There will be a perforated PVC pipe within the wall with weep holes at 25 feet on center. They'll discharge onto river rock energy dissipators to mitigate any erosion along the toe of the wall.
That's what I wanted to hear.
And is the intended use for this area to remain as what appears to be a planted bed, or?
So the top slope will be a planted mulch bed. It will be grassed below to mitigate any sort of erosion below. Because right now all of the mulch, because there's not any vegetation up there, it's all sloughing away from the residents. So we're going to build that up and then install seed along the toe.
Along the toe. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kralinger? Thank you, Joe. Anybody else care to address the board on this matter? With that, I'm going to pull it back to the board. Is there any discussion amongst the board?
Mr. Chair, this seems like another necessary retaining wall in our agenda tonight. I would support this project.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0030 at 136 John Wickham.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 23-0152 at 223 Oakmere Park. Good to hear from Robin tonight.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 23-0152. Mr. Ryan Linekin with Williams Landscape and Design has applied for an after-the-fact Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Derek and Ms. Susan Smith for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a paver patio, deck, retaining wall, and fountain located at 223 Oakmere Park within the Ford's Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. On the screen above, you'll see subject parcel here in blue, and then Powhatan Creek watershed boundary there in yellow. This parcel was platted in 2003 prior to the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here is aerial photography at the site showing the existing house, topography at the site, and the resource protection area. This lot is 0.83 acres, of which 100% is located within the RPA. In November of 2023, officials from the James City County Stormwater and Resource Protection Division received notice that a patio and 2 decks were being constructed on this property without the submission of a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Exception Request. At that time, the applicant stopped all construction and began the process of obtaining a permit for the proposed work. Following discussion with staff, the applicants are now proposing to construct a 400 square foot deck and 312 square foot paver patio. Additionally, they are proposing a retaining wall and fountain adjacent to the proposed patio. So to recap that, here is the edge of wetlands shown here in green, which is part of the reason why 100% of this lot is within the RPA. Here is that proposed deck. Again, that one is 400 square feet. And then the proposed patio with the retaining wall here on its border, and then that fountain. The patio itself is 312 square feet, but total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 770 square feet in the seaward 50-foot RPA. And that number includes the retaining wall and then that fountain area. Under the original permit for the house, which was CBE-16-086, a 180 square foot deck was approved in the same area as this proposed deck. This impervious area is being credited towards this application, making the total of newly approved encroachment equal to 590 square feet. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1.5 planting units. Because this exception request is being heard before the board after the fact, staff will require double the mitigation units equaling 3 planting units, or 3 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 9 shrubs. Additionally, the mitigation associated with CBE 16-086 for the construction of the home was never fully completed. Therefore, staff is requiring that the applicants replant the area of original mitigation, which equaled 12 planting units, bringing total mitigation requirements for this property equal to 15 units. And above you'll see the applicants have provided a mitigation plan that equals 13 canopy trees, 11 understory trees, and 91 shrubs, which is equivalent to the 15 planting unit mitigation requirement. All of those plantings can be seen both around the perimeter of the house, my apologies, as well as within the wetlands and around. Staff is also requiring that an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse due to the environmental sensitivity of this lot. Here is site photography. This was taken back in November when staff was first made aware of this construction. At that time, they had started working on the patio area as it was previously proposed. So you can see the work that had taken place at that time. And photos taken in early April are now shown. This was taken after a significant rain event, which explains a lot of the flooding that can be seen above. But we're standing near the area of the proposed deck, looking towards the patio area. And again, that deck area coming off the back of the house. Just moving around the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a paver patio, deck, retaining wall, and fountain. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a patio, deck, retaining wall, and fountain are considered accessory in nature. This exception request is also being heard by the board after the initial construction of the project began. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on circumstances or conditions that are self-created or self-imposed. and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be major for the proposed development. If the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. An affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicants must submit a surety of $11,250 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the planting of 15 planting units in the form of 13 canopy trees, 11 understory trees, and 91 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 10th, 2025, and written request for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Questions?
When this house was built, this is something that was added on after the house was built, am I correct?
Yes, the house was built back in 2016, 2017. There was the original deck that was proposed, but this entire proposal that you've seen here tonight is new.
So this was not in the original,
No, not everything you see was in the original.
this is an add.
Did they ever build the original deck?
No, sir.
Any other questions for Robin? Hearing none, thank you. I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board?
Good
Name and
evening.
address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Benny Zhang. I'm with the James City County Office of Kaufman and Knowles at 4801 Courthouse Street, Suite 300. I am here joined tonight with Mr. Ryan Linnekin and Nate Reams of Williams Landscape and Design. We comprise of the applicant's team. Also joined us tonight, we have Mr. Derek and Susan Smith, our clients in this matter, and the applicant that's seeking the relief before this board. Rob and Miss Benedict, sorry, has done a great job summarizing this case. Just wanted to highlight two additional observations about this case that might prove useful to the board. First, just by way of background, my client purchased this property around September 1st of 2021. They're relatively new residents of James City County. There's been a series of events that have comprised the background of this particular case, but what we would say and bring before the board is that this will cover two objectives. One, to fulfill the stated objective and desire of our clients with regard to the patio and the porch, but also will tie in and bring to full circle the original mitigation plan that, as Ms. Benedict mentioned, was never totally fulfilled. So just by way of background, when staff heard about the construction that was ongoing and put the stop order, there was found to be an additional violation on the property initially where 2,400 square feet was cleared away. And we wanted to let the board know tonight that that was actually something that the predecessor owner had done, unbeknownst to the current owner, our clients here tonight. And that's something with this plan that we're bringing forward will enhance that mitigation. In fact, when it gets recorded, we believe will be useful and in the best interest for the property and the county. Also worth mentioning is this has been a series of events where there was a recorded affidavit with the original mitigation plan. There was a study done by Roth Environmental LLC around 2017 that was approved by the county, featured 13 canopy trees, 0 understory, and 80 shrubs with 25% allowance for non-native plants that ultimately was approved by the county and recorded. For some reason, the realtors, the title company, and even the Ford's Colony HOA, which approved an original rendition of this plan back in September, of this past fall have missed all of that. And it's been a learning process for our client. Once we found out there was an issue, we worked earnestly with staff. There's been a series of back and forth on just getting towards a comfortable place, so if you will, in terms of what the minimum necessary relief would be afforded. So just to wrap this up real quickly, it went from an original approximate 1,600 square feet. Then we received some rounds of staff feedback. It went to 1,196 square feet. That wasn't enough. Staff felt like there was some wiggle room to be had there. And now we come before you with the reduced amount of 770 square feet before you all, along with the 15 planting units that would enhance the mitigation. Happy to take any questions. We would encourage the board to approve this. Just wanted to thank real quickly staff, Mike Wilson, Robert Benedict, and Andy Dean with the County Attorney's Office. I'm happy to answer any questions, but also the technical experts, Ryan and Nate, are available as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Zhang? Just curious, if you would. You mentioned that there was an affidavit recorded for the original house construction.
Mm-hmm.
Was that not revealed during the transaction with your client?
I wasn't involved with the transaction, sir, but based on initial conversations when I was retained, they had no idea this house and property was even within an entire RPA area.
Understand.
So we've had some informal conversations. Staff certainly interested to find a way to better present that, but somehow through title, through the realtor, even through the HOA, it wasn't known about this.
The reason I bring it up partially is we tried very hard to be fair and impartial in our deliberations and adhere to the criteria that are assigned to us as the board. And one of those is the minimum necessary to afford relief. And so when we go through that process and then we come back with an expansion beyond what was originally approved, it causes concern. I'll just put it that way.
Absolutely.
So I'm just giving you some insight into the deliberations that you likely will hear tonight, but that's part of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Name and
Evening,
address for
board.
the record, please.
Yep. Ryan Leniken, Williams Landscape and Design, 1554 Penniman Road here in Williamsburg, James City County. Again, just to give you a little bit of background, Benny and the staff with James City County certainly have covered it. One thing to note, the original property plats that we were given to work from did not denote the 50 and 100-foot RPAs. And then again, with submitting to the ECC in Ford's Colony, their immediate approval of it did not bring up any flags. Generally, they will even catch it and say, hey, this has to go in front of the Chesapeake Bay. The moment we knew when we were pulling building permits for the deck, we stopped work. We had only excavated for the patio space. There had been no hardscapes or anything laid into the property. And then we immediately started pursuing the means to have the project approved. So happy to answer any other questions you guys might have as far as the new plantings go, reestablishing the mitigation plantings for the property, and then the new hardscapes.
If you've sat in on any or many of these types of hearings, the issues obviously are pertaining to water quality and
Sure.
sediment leaving the site. And I'm just curious if there's an opportunity, or have you built into your plan an opportunity to treat the water that would come off of the patio?
Other than the additional plantings and then creating a lesser area of turf and reestablishing some natural area off the back end of the property there. If you're looking at that, it's north-south. It would be the north end of the property there. We're reducing the turf area. Outside of that, we don't have any additional drainage or infiltration trenches planned.
You know, if the soil is suitable for infiltration, I saw a lot of ponded water, so I'm,
Yeah, now that ponded water in that picture, if you want to even go back to it, is only there because of our dig out. That would not have been sitting there otherwise. So, once the patio had been put in place and the property had been regraded, that water would not have just settled there. It is obviously in a low area and it does hold, I'm not sure an infiltration trench would do anything other than just fill up, quite honestly.
very good.
All right.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else care to comment on the application? Thank you, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Eric Smith, homeowner at 223 Oakmere Park. Chairman and board members, appreciate your time hearing this case. I just want to quickly reiterate that we purchased, my wife Susan and I purchased the property in September of 2021, approximately 3 to 4 years after the home had been built. We were given absolutely no idea that the property was in a resource protected area. We even have a plat that was used at the closing that identifies the area as not an RPA. We went through real estate agents, we went through when we purchased the house, and even before we closed on the house, our real estate agent had arranged for a builder to come by because we knew that the house did not have a deck or a patio, and we wanted to get some ideas. Nothing ever came up then about, hey, this might be a RPA that you might need to consider. Then about 6 months ago, we finally got around to starting the project, and we went through the Ford's Colony HOA. We went through, before that, we went through the closing process with Lidl Title. Nothing ever came up about that. Our real estate agents, Lismore Associates, I'm told that's a big outfit here in Williamsburg. Nothing was ever brought up about that. Then we go through the HOA to get approval for this project. Nothing is brought up about that. The minute we heard that there's a problem and that this is within this thing called an RPA that we had never heard of, we stopped work. Our contractor stopped work, and we have been working for 6 months almost to the day ever since in order to try to get a resolution as to what this is all about, how we can reduce the footprint of our plan, and what additional plantings need to be done. I will again point out that the original house was constructed, approved, everything was taken care of, and apparently many of the original plants were never installed. So we would just like to enjoy our backyard like every other member of our Ford's Colony subdivision who has either a deck or a patio and maybe even both. But apparently because we are in this RPA, that's a major problem for us. But I would just appreciate your due consideration of our situation there. And I'd like to introduce my neighbor, Jim Bartolotta, who would also like to say a few words.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bartolotta, welcome.
Jim Bartolotta, 219 Oakmere Park. I'm a direct neighbor to Derek and Susan Smith. I've been there since 2018. I just wanted to give them a character reference. They're wonderful neighbors, very responsible. Derek is on our Nottingham Place board, which is a sub-board of the general Ford's Colony. A graduate of West Point, so he's a top-rated person from that respect. And all they're trying to do is just have a place to enjoy their property in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. We all have patios and decks in that area, so I don't think it's anything unusual, and I have absolutely no objection to what's going on here today. And recommend them both highly enough.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else care to address the board? Not, I will pull the discussion back to the board.
The unfortunate situation that people buy property and may be misinformed and not have the full scope of what the county requires. And I'm one that feels for the homeowner in a situation like that. And it looks like this is one of those situations that they didn't do this intentionally. And have to deal with.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I would just add to that, one thing that you mentioned earlier that we struggle with on the board is the minimum necessary to afford relief. And I think certainly here we have a deck and a patio, and I certainly feel also for the applicant in their situation. There is a significant amount of surety put up front for plantings for this property. Very, very large amount of surety put up for 15 planting units. So I think I would certainly be in support of this proposal.
Other discussion? I am, my personal view on it is that we do go through great pains to minimize the encroachment. And then once those deals tend to be struck, permits are issued, the intent hopefully is that, especially on these lots that are compromised by large amounts of RPA, that there's not significant alteration moving forward, whether there's a change in ownership or not. Challenging. And as the board knows, we have wrestled with these mightily over the last several years as the lots that are being developed now are tighter and more challenging. Any other comments from the public? Public hearing is still open. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Chair, I share a lot of your concerns that you just articulated. I think certainly for this, since it's an after the fact, the planting mitigation has been doubled. So there is a significant amount of mitigation here. I know you also mentioned potentially other mitigation factors as far as controlling the water basins or something like that nature. But I struggle with that too, but I still think I would support this project.
I have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-23-0152 at 223 Oakmere Park.
Mr. Wilson.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
No.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda. CBPA 24-0031 at 113 Glasgow, construction of a single-family home.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0031. Mr. Chase Grogg with Atlantic Resources has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. John and Ms. Cherie Constantino for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling with an attached deck located at 113 Glasgow within the Fords Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. Above, you'll see the parcel here in blue and a little bit of the watershed boundary there in yellow. This parcel was platted in 1988 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here is aerial photography of the lot. Current conditions include a wooded lot with wetlands through the middle, rear, and a pocket wetland towards the front of the lot. Here is topography at the site, as well as the floodplain as it affects this property, and the resource protection area. You can see those 3 bits of wetland outlined in black. They'll be easier to see on the site plan here in a second. Total lot size of this property is 0.27 acres, of which 100% is within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a single-family dwelling with an attached deck. Case number CBPA 23-0083 was originally heard before this board on October 11th, 2023, where it was denied. The original site plan included 3,011 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA and 1,678 square feet of permanent wetland impacts. The applicants have since decreased the proposed house size, making total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equal to 1,243 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA and 1,471 square feet of permanent wetland impacts, for a total of 2,714 square feet of impervious impacts. Recapping that again, you can just barely see the 100-foot RPA buffer here in the bottom right-hand corner, but the 50-foot as it surrounds this property. Again, those 3 areas of wetland outlined in green here around the house, and then another little pocket up towards the front of the house. Everything in orange is the impervious from the house and the driveway, again, all within the 50-foot RPA, and the limits of clearing by this black squiggly line with some selective clearing for sanitary connection here in the rear. The minimum first floor square footage required for this section of Ford's Colony is 1,100 square feet. This proposed house has a first floor square footage equal to 1,167 square feet, which is a 6% increase. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 7 planting units, or 7 canopy trees, 14 understory trees, and 21 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan consisting of 5 canopy trees, 8 understory trees, and 41 shrubs, therefore satisfying county mitigation requirements. That mitigation plan can be seen above with all the plantings shown in green. Additionally, the applicants are proposing 2 microbial-retention best management practices, or BMPs, to manage drainage on this lot, and those can be seen in pink, one here and one here as well. Staff is also requesting that an affidavit be recorded on in the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse due to the environmental sensitivity on this lot. Here is site photography. This was taken back in September of 2023, standing at the road and looking into the lot. And moving further, that pocket wetland at the front is right beyond here. This is moving back and looking towards the right of the lot at the neighbor's property, and standing sort of in the middle of the wetlands, in the middle of the lot. This is current drain between the 2 properties. I believe this actually lies entirely on the neighbor's lot, but it currently manages the drainage for the property, the 113 lot. Again, this is standing just looking at the rear, looking at existing wetlands, and then looking back towards the street. This is current conditions taken just last week. Things obviously haven't grown back, so it gives you a little bit of a better view of the property and the right side of the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling with an attached deck. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of the single-family dwelling is entirely within the seaward 50-foot RPA. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be major for the proposed development. If the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. An affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicants must submit a surety of $7,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 7 planting units and the construction of 2 micro bioretention BMP facilities. The applicants must submit a letter of installation from a qualified professional to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. This letter must verify compliance with all approved stormwater construction plans for the stormwater BMP facilities. No surveyed as-built drawings are required. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 10th, 2025, and written requests for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Robin? I have one. Can you go back to the map that shows the wetlands on the site? So, as depicted, those appear to be isolated wetlands. Are those, in fact, isolated?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Mike Wilson, Section Chief, Stormwater. Excellent question. No, they are connected through a pipe network that was deemed there in place prior to the ordinance per the DEQ guidance for non-connected isolated wetlands. It's figure 5D, I believe.
They are considered connected.
So we do consider them connected, even though, per your observation, they are isolated. We have to look at it as if that impact had not occurred prior, and with the floodplain wetlands to the right side of the property, there was no, and looking at historic aerial photography, there was no reason to believe that it would not have been connected prior to the disconnection from the what it turns out to be from the sanitary sewer. And that was prior to the house to the right side of this graphic being built as well. I hope that answers your question.
Answered the question.
I think I butchered that, but.
Well, the key point there, what I think, is that you're reconnecting they reconnected what was previously connected, in your opinion. So,
sir. And we have had that conversation with multiple environmental consultants, not necessarily all who agreed with me.
Well, did the Corps of the state confirm these wetland boundaries?
They had previously, before the upheaval in the Corps' jurisdiction from those recent court cases. I believe those were done in 2017, 2018 timeframe.
So you don't have a
We don't have a current
read from
2023, 2024 delineation. Approval. I mean, we have a delineation, we just don't have it confirmed by either the Corps or DEQ.
Making sure we have jurisdiction.
Appreciate the comments and the concern. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions for Robin? Thank you, Robin. With that, I will open the public hearing. Mr. Grogg.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for the report, Ms. Benedict. Chase Grogg with Land Tech Resources, 205 Bullifonts Boulevard, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. As you previously are aware, this project came before you. When it came to us, we had a very quick conversation that the proposed impacts previously were way too much for what's going on with this lot. So we worked with the client to greatly reduce the footprint, get it pretty much within Ford's Colony's minimum footprint requirement, as well as pull these limits of clearing both in from the back as well from the side. The previous site plan was pretty much clearing the whole lot. So these wetlands in the back will be pretty much remain undisturbed, except for, yes, the sewer clean out is in the back. So there'll be a tie-in to get to that sewer lateral. This house, I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to go out there. This house sits pretty much down in the low point, and that's why there's this concentration of wetlands in the middle. And so the main point of our grading along this side is to get the water around to one point. So as kind of was previously discussed, there's a riprap channel up front here that this wetlands outfall to. The main body of this falls into a concrete flume that then falls into the more main concrete ditch and then out through the drainage pipe. And then this section in the back goes through another pipe, connects into a separate pipe and into this concrete channel. So a majority of our grading is to create a point here to where we can take this water around the back as well as around the front of the house and try to disturb as small a wetland footprint as possible. Due to the low nature of this lot and wetlands being located on it, in-ground infiltration was not an option for us. So in this particular instance, we placed two microbioretentions on, oops, can you go back, Mike? Sorry. Two microbioretentions on the back of the house. This one is sized to take the back half of the main body of the house as well as the back half of the garage roof. And then the left portion of this roof will take the remainder of it. Those are just like the ones that are in the ground. They'll have 12 inches of stone in the bottom, 3 inches of pea gravel, 18 inches of soil media, and then a mulch layer and plants on top. They'll be able to pond 6 inches, and then during a good rain event, overflow over the top, or they'll overflow into a catch basin inside of them through a pipe system out into the back, so we don't have any. We had contemplated just kind of letting them overflow like a weir system, but we were worried about erosion. So since we'll already have an underdrain built into there, it'll just go into a rim structure that's set above the mulch, so it all can discharge down at soil grade. As we do with all of our sites, whenever we try and touch base with all of the clients around or neighbors around the site. Mr. Heath to the right, we had a site meeting with him and Ryan Lee. There were concerns about a tree located next to a dying tree that some water was going into the roots. It appears at the moment that the water leaving this wetland is not getting to this flared end. It's going into the ground. So there were discussions on if we were able to construct these swales, how we would safely and more securely ensure that water gets to the concrete flume and does not continue into the ground. And so we did our best to address their concerns. Again, not necessarily your guys' purview, but drainage was a concern with this one. We're the bowl, a lot of water comes to us and then goes to the neighbor to the east. Prior to us being involved, drainage calculations were performed for that pipe. The previous site plan, that pipe had the capacity for it, and since we greatly reduced both our disturbance, proposed impervious, we did not rerun those calculations, as it would just show again that pipe is sufficient for the flow that we have going towards it. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm going to go back to the core or DEQ jurisdiction. Who issued your permit for the house?
The Army Corps of Engineers has issued the permit for those 3 wetland impacts, and we've been asked by staff, and it's in the works right now, to remove this impact. I believe we determined that a building permit would not be issued until the rear wetland impacts were removed from our current permit. So we have an Army Corps permit confirming these wetlands, and we already have an approval to impact all three, but are going to remove the back one since we'll have one for the sewer connection, but other than that, that'll be removed.
How are you tying into the drainage that you mentioned, the concrete flume or swale?
We're going to add some stone in there so that it ties in a little bit better. I don't think there's no real point to extend the concrete out. So we're just going to, our two swales will come around and we will shape some stone to tie into that. And there's basically, at the moment, that pipe, from what everyone can determine within Ford's Colony, does not appear to sit within a drainage easement. Ford's Colony does have a 5-foot drainage easement along all their side property lines that they don't use that often. But so Ford's Colony is on board that they have some ownership with that and working through. They're aware that during construction there may need to be some small modifications to that swale to make sure that all parties are, protected from the water. But again, it all flows there now. It is all size there now, as you saw from those pictures.
Any other questions for Mr. Grog? Very good. Thank you
very much.
Anybody else in the audience? Mr. Heath?
Chairman and members of the board, my name is Leonard C. Heath Jr., 401 Skimino Landing Drive, Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm an attorney with Heath Verser and Newport News. I have the great pleasure today of representing my son, Jordan Heath, who is here, sitting back here. This case is too close to home, both figuratively and literally for Jordan, so he asked me to speak on his behalf today. With regard to this proposal, Jordan lives at 115 Glasgow, which is the lot to the southeast where all the water's draining. More importantly, he's the downhill side, and all of the water will be going to his lot. Interestingly, this particular lot that you have before you was purchased in 2021 for $10,000. That is not a price usually associated with a developable lot. Obviously, whoever bought it knew that there were going to be issues with it. With regard to the application, they're building a house in the middle of the wetlands and the RPA. More importantly, and I have not heard anything about this tonight, there is a spring right in the middle of where this house is going to be built. If you walk out, you can see the spring. That's the reason we believe the culvert was built initially to protect Jordan's house. That spring has been there since Jordan purchased his house. He purchased the house in June of 2021. I can vouch for the fact that I've seen it. It is always running. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. There'll be a slow trickle. It can be going pretty quickly, but there is a spring there that nobody has taken into account with regard to this project. More importantly, it's all going to, and it's been referenced, the culvert that is on Jordan's property. And I understand that Ford's Colony says, for today, we'll take responsibility for it, but there is nothing in writing to that effect. There is no easement. There is no joint maintenance agreement. That is on Jordan's property. That is Jordan's responsibility. So what is happening is the developer is coming in here and wanting to push this into place, and then he's going to create a problem, and he's going to walk away from it. And the people will be left with the problem with Jordan and his new neighbor. Now, they've indicated they want to put these micro BMPs in. I've never heard of those before. Landtech's excellent company, but there's no discussion here about the maintenance requirements, who's responsible for maintaining it, what happens if this homeowner doesn't maintain it, and it's all going on to Jordan's property. Jordan's life savings is in this house right now. He's a young man, and all of his life savings is in this house. I'm here to protect his house. This is eye-popping when it comes to completely wiping out a wetlands and an RPA. And if you look at the plan that's been submitted as well, Landtech says that they didn't go and check the wetlands. That wasn't their job. And that the contractor shall provide positive drainage away from the buildings shown hereon, note 7. And I would expect that. You would want that. What that means is there's going to be a bigger impact into the wetlands in the RPA. than what's reflected. And it's going to be draining away from the house. Where is it going? It's going to Jordan's house. Again, to his facilities that his neighbor has no responsibility for. Ford's Colony, they're nice folks, but if there's a change in management, there's no agreement. So, again, I'm scratching my head on this as to somebody coming in and buying the lot for $10,000 and trying to push this through. I cannot see how you could possibly approve this because it wipes out completely and totally the wetlands. And when the house is built, what's going to happen to that spring? Is that spring going to pop up on Jordan's lot? Is it going to pop on somebody else's lot? We don't know. But if you go and walk it, you can see that spring. So with all of that said, we would ask that you deny the permit at this point. For all the reasons that I've stated here tonight, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Heath? I have one. Is it possible for you to identify where that spring surfaces on this?
Winter works. And Jordan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, where's the point?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. There you go. The spring is about right there. Is that approximately right, Jordan? Maybe a little higher? Oh, we moved. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. A little bit higher up here. And again, it meanders down to where his, meanders down to where the culvert is. And we have been told, and Jordan didn't own the house at the time, so the historical aspect from the neighbors is that the swale initially was built to protect Jordan's house, and because sinkholes were showing up on his property, and they were worried about his driveway collapsing. You can see the drainage line actually goes under his driveway. The other thing that I'll point out, the last hearing, there was, I think, an observation, I think a wise observation by one of the board members saying there's nobody here from the neighborhood, so everybody must agree. Well, actually, that's not the case. What happened was the notice of the meeting was mailed, and we know staff did mail it because it's postmarked. It was postmarked a couple of weeks ahead of time. It didn't get delivered until 2 weeks after your hearing. And it wasn't 2 weeks after the hearing to Jordan, it was 2 weeks to all the other neighbors. So they got this notice and they were like, why are we getting this? Because the hearing's already occurred. So does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Would anybody else care to address the board? Mr. Grogg.
I just would like to make three quick pointers. As for mitigation, something I did not mention that these wetlands within Ford's Colony, whenever wetlands are impacted, there's no 1/10 of an acre grace. So there will be off-site mitigation purchased for these wetlands that are impacted. Our note number 7 is a standard note that goes on a plot plan no matter where it's located and is referencing more the requirement for a builder to ensure 6 inches of fall 10 feet away from a building. So our limits of disturbance are what they are. The silt fence is what they're, that note will not cause any more disturbance than what is already reflected on our plan. And then as for a spring, many houses have spring issues. The Heath actually pointed out that a house a couple doors down from this had a spring come up underneath their house. So French drains can be installed, and there are ways to get that water away from a foundation and ensure its flow, and so that they can still construct this home. So happy to answer any other questions, but just wanted to point those 3 things out.
Let me ask, with regard to it is a little concerning that there's not an O&M agreement or an easement with Ford's Colony to maintain a drainage easement through their property. Is that issue not surfaced to the point of action?
It has not. I don't know if you guys have had any further conversation. It has. It has not. I mean, so we met Ryan Lee out there, who's, you know, basically in charge of all of this. And I mean, what they said is, I mean, they're aware of it. They had a couple other concerns about a couple of the other pipes. I know Ryan was looking into that. And so, you know, Forts Colony is maintaining it for the time being, but they had, you know, their folder there. I mean, I'm happy to try and work with Forts Colony. You know, I don't know, again, since there are multiple lots draining to this point, so I don't know that I can say that, you know, just our lot should enter into some sort of agreement with that. But yes, that's something that, you know, we can work on looking at.
Well, it appears to
Forts
me
Colony.
that, you know, the easement perhaps needs to be with Mr. Heath, because the
I mean more for the main, the overall main, you know, who's, yes, it needs to be on Mr. Heath's property, I agree, but who owns that easement, I think, is the big, you know, is it between Mr. Heath and every neighbor that drains to there? Is it Forts Colony? I think that's kind of the bigger question potentially.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Question. The gentleman brought up that the water, when you have a downpour of rain, runoff, does it funnel to this next lot that this gentleman here owns?
It goes into the existing concrete ditch into a concrete pipe that is sized correctly as well. Wait,
Where does that go?
Can you go back, Mike, to the flood zone map? So
Is that concrete ditch, is that concrete ditch that you're talking about, is that a ditch that controls the water off this lot, or does it transfer over to this next lot that this gentleman has?
Yeah, so if you look at the screen real quick, Mr. Waltrip, I'm going to explain two things, and I'm going to go back to our site plan to answer the question kind of in its more totality. So there is the concrete open ditch exists in front of, which is our side property, but his house is angled this way. So in front of his lot, the open concrete ditch is located here. There is a T off of that open channel, which is still an open channel, that comes onto our lot. The concrete, that flume then flows into basically a head wall concrete pipe that then goes along here past Mr. Heath's house and outfalls into the swamp. And, you know, kind of the bigger picture here, all of, you know, this whole area is within a flood zone. So during a major rain event, it all, you know, during a big hurricane or anything, the water is a problem due to it also being located in a flood zone. And then, can you go back to our site?
So what you're saying is, when it came around, it's actually running in that green area on his piece of property.
Yeah, so yes, yeah, I mean, so our entire lot, all of our drainage as well as these neighbors to the north and our lot to the west, drains into, the neighbors in the back have a pipe that tie in. This wetland in the back ties into another pipe that ties in. This area right in here is the open concrete channel that then ties into the pipe that departs and where all the water exits.
Any other questions for Mr. Grog? Any other comments from the public, the applicant? I'll bring the matter back in front of the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair, this is another one of those difficult ones. I think certainly Mr. Grog's done a great job trying to mitigate and work with what he has, you know, within the parameters of what he has here in this lot. I also share the concerns with the adjacent property owner that water is going to be funneled over there to his property, and without having some sort of an agreement, if I'm that landowner, I would be concerned about that, because if there's an issue that's created on this lot, it's going to just get transferred to the existing home and the existing homeowner. I certainly understand the concern with the Heaths on that matter.
I would concur with your assessment. Any other comments? Grog?
I think based on your guys' comments, what I would like to request is to defer it so we can try and address some drainage easement concerns with Mr. Heath and Ford's Colony and bring back a proposal. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask, but I guess are there any concerns about our mitigation, the microbioretentions, any other items that pertain to more of the resource, I guess you could say, besides the drainage?
I won't speak for the board, but I will say that I appreciate the microbioretention, more of a polishing than stormwater treatment, but I take what we can get. I think I appreciate the house size being reduced to approximately the minimum necessary. I'm not wild about developing in a wetland, as you probably know, but you've done most of what we've asked. So that's where I stand.
I would mirror Mr. Roadley's comments on that.
The applicant has requested to defer the application. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept the deferral request for case number CBPA 240031 at 113 Glasgow.
Notice we didn't put a date specific on that. Would you rather we put it specific to when, Mr. Grog?
I think we can go with next month's in hopes that we can, work that out pretty quickly. And if we need to extend it again, we can.
So motion is to defer to the May meeting.
The May 8th Chesapeake Bay meeting.
May 8th Chesapeake Bay meeting.
Do I need to add that to my motion? To
No.
defer? Okay, all right.
Mr. Wilson.
Motion is to defer this application to the May 8th, 2024 Chesapeake Bay Board meeting. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you all. Any items for board considerations, Mr. Wilson?
I shook my head no, but yeah, actually there is one. The Board of Supervisors has appointed an alternate to this board, and his name is Mark McElroy. He could not make it tonight. Hopefully he will be here at the May 8th meeting, and we could make proper introductions at that time.
Good. Thank you. Any matters of special privilege? Nope. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.